Destiny of an Emperor. Fulfill an ancient prophecy. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
And we all hope to die in the same hour of the same day of the same year, and we're making that pact right now on the podcast, right, guys?
Yes. Not only do I hope it, I vow it. I will make sure that if I'm ever about to die, I will find you guys and take you down with me. I think that's
sort of what it sounds like, doesn't it? It's sort of like a suicide pact, and I don't really know what that's really supposed to tell you about someone's like confidence in the mission of nostalgia.
It depends. If I'm like, wow, Sean is going to greatly outlive me, like I definitely want to make that pact, and I'll ride your coattails to the long life.
But it sounds like they expect to die in battle if it happens to be at the same hour of the same day of the same year. Like they plan to fail.
Yeah, I think that I could take it as like, all right, the three of us are going into battle, and like if you're going to die, I'm not like backing down from that. I will fight with you until the end. That's basically what it feels like to me.
That's very poetic. I like that one better.
I'm going to make sure that I outlive both of you.
Good luck.
When you hear the title, Destiny of an Emperor, I don't know about you guys, but I was expecting one of those Koei grand strategy games. This is an RPG from Capcom.
With, like, the flavorings of one of... Like, it basically is the story of a grand strategy game that we have played. Maybe Joe didn't.
Yeah, isn't this Romance of the Three Kingdoms?
Yeah, this is Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the book. I guess this is sort of like, like the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings and, like, the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, but it's just Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's interesting that we're getting two vastly different takes on the source material here.
And it's funny, I know you asked Joe if he, maybe he didn't play that one. That is, of course, because Joe is not usually present for the Koei episodes. But
I was present for one.
Right, it's just a coincidence.
Yeah, I swear.
Joe, while we have you, maybe you would like to kind of set the stage here of just like, we had Romance of the Three Kingdoms as a grand strategy game, as a Nobunaga style, and we always go back to Nobunaga because that was the first one we dealt with.
It's a great thing to say. It just feels like great out of the mouth,
Yeah, exactly. Nobunaga, and that's some of children's first words, I'm sure. Maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about how that kind of game could be translated into an RPG.
Well, if you're asking how it could be translated and maybe how this game attempted
how this game translated it, yes.
I can do that. On the surface it's very different than like a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Warrior, but the more you look at it, it's at a bird's eye view, it's similar. But what it basically does is you play as these what are they, generals?
Warlords.
Yeah.
Warlords.
Warlords.
And you wander the map as you're taking on other warlords and recruiting them. But instead of being like you're one character with HP, you're one warlord with soldiers, and your soldiers are your HP. So like it kind of but really, that's what it is. Your soldiers are your HP.
Made me think of and the bones are their money, but
and they've got like tactics, which is kind of their way of getting magic into the game, and they have everything that you expect in like a classic JRPG is kind of here, but translated to with the help of your imagination, you're watching large scale battles of armies unfold rather than 4 characters fighting 4 goblins or something.
And I like that recontextualization of like HP, and like instead of magic, you're deploying tactics, but it's kind of half-hearted because you go to an inn and it has 3 beds, and it's like, does your whole army just sleep in this inn? Is it like a massive Amazon warehouse of an inn, or are we three adventurers, and maybe this was like old assets from something they were working on that was more traditional. And then you have like, you could buy items and it's just like, oh, here's a robe. Or like are you buying 3,000 robes? Because like the food, it's a high number. Like that makes sense. Yeah. Everything else is kind of really abstracted.
Yeah, I definitely saw that, and I guess the optimist in me was more like, well, this is just trying to be abstract ways to represent like the health of your army. But the more like you describe it, you're kind of right. Like the food is not like, oh, buy a loaf of bread. It's like buy 30,000 food. So like it does, like the more you mention, like it probably is that they just like, well, okay, we're not gonna like figure out all these little things. We'll just keep those all generic and just change like some of the context. But I was able to play it and kind of imagine it as like, yeah, I'm plussing up this warlord, and therefore his soldiers are being plussed up too. But
yeah,
it's interesting that you mentioned the rice and food system and the HP thing, because I think those are the two things that set this apart from the Dragon Warriors and the Final Fantasies, where yes, the actual like turn-based combat plays very similar, but the food thing specifically is very reminiscent of those Koei Grand Strategy games, because those always have, like, you always have to make sure you have enough rice, or else you're going to, have an unhappy civilization, or you have to, like, feed your army and stuff. That counts as something in addition to the HP of the game, where every step you take, basically, is, like, consuming food, and then you go into the towns and battle and stuff as ways to get additional resources. And it's not something you can, like, constantly have to be managing. It's not like a survival simulator, but it is something that you have to keep in mind as you're playing the game, of never being without too much food, because then you'll start taking damage, essentially, because your troops are dying. And again, your troops are your HP. But your troops being your HP plays into the combat side of things, too, because that is how your attack power is determined in this game, believe it or not. How much damage you do is indicated by how healthy your army is at the scale of a power to the power of 10. So
I'll say that I didn't even realize that, but that makes sense. That does make it like
that makes it mean more.
They did put more thought into that element of it, where it's like,
it's more than just saying like, oh, it's not HP, it's people.
Yeah, it's not just a reskin of HP. It's like, no, these are your people, and if you don't have as many of them, you're not going to hit as hard, because
Right. It's not just like a numbers game where it's like, well, I just want to have more so this way I can outlast the enemy. It's like, I actually do more damage. But I did mention that it's a power of 10 thing, so it does kind of become a game of optimization, especially in the battles, where essentially if you have 100 troops, let's say, so your HP is 100. The second you drop to 99, now you've dropped from a power of 10, so your damage is now different from 0 to 99, 100 to 999, 1,000 to 9,999. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not like, oh, it does an exact calculation of, I have 271 troops, and so this is my damage output.
An army / character that has 998 hits just as hard as one with 101.
Yes.
Oof.
And so, yes, exactly. And so what happens is you wind up, not even in your own battles, of course, but the battles that, the enemies you encounter, you start looking at, well, who's got the most troops, right? Like some of the ones that are just generically labeled Rebel Force all have, like, at the early part of the game, they have like 100 troops each or whatever, and then one of them has, they have less than 100, they have 25, and then the main general has 100. Well, I should start taking him out first to make sure he's just as weak as his rebel forces. And so it just kind of becomes a game of balancing numbers rather than like strategically thinking about who you should attack, because there's not classes, there's just size of armies to think about.
So you were playing a lot. I mean, I guess, so I guess this begs us to kind of go into like the actual like moment to moment of these battles, because there's a couple ways to play them, and the way you're describing is sort of the more micromanagey. This can take you 10 minutes way to in a single battle way of fighting, and then there's also like the like all out, which is good for just like random encounters. Like
it's essentially an auto battle system, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't even know because you're not really like you're not creating any tactics. You're just throwing these two masses of people together. If you select all out and without any like management at all, and then there's the one where it's like more Final Fantasy / Dragon Warrior, where you're selecting each thing you're going to do, but that like takes forever. So I just wanted to do auto battle for everything.
Yeah, and I guess the happy medium there, which thankfully they do allow for it in the game, is that you can all out at any time. So the best way to play the game is essentially to first take your strongest guys and whittle down, the largest enemies, the largest sized enemies on the screen. And then once they're all kind of below a certain damage input, now you can do all out, and you'll just kind of know that like you're going to be doing larger damage than they are, and you don't have to worry about necessarily any of your characters getting a knockout or anything like that. So it's a little bit of both. And I do agree with you that it sometimes is, like, especially with the random encounter system, if you're just running into, like, 5v5, like, it is a lot to ask to just continue to use battling and tactics when All Out is just there to kind of do the same exact thing, and you're probably just going to rush back to the town and sleep at the inn because you got more than enough gold in one battle to sleep your entire army of thousands of people. So maybe it should have had more of a, like, trade-off for that, but I found myself just basically random battling a lot, waiting till I was weak enough, going back to the inn, sleeping, and then just continuing with my all-out attacks, except for, obviously, this game has large story moments, too, where you have to take on specific generals, and as Joe mentioned, you have the ability to then recruit those generals. You recruit so many characters in this game. It's nuts. I've heard of RPGs where, like, you can have 90 people join your party or whatever over the course of the game, and I feel like this comes close to that. Like, I don't know exactly how many people you get, but even just in the very first town, you already have your team of 3, and then you immediately just get 2 other guys to join your party just by talking to them. You can completely miss them if you don't talk to them, but they'll just be like, hey, we want to join the fight, and then they do, and then just as easily, they can die in the battle, too, and that's the end of that.
Yeah, I mean, you can bring them back, but
yes,
but I kind of like to play it. I mean, just because it was different to play it that way. Where as long as the people, weren't my like main characters that I was using, like that I needed. I was like, well, I just recruited these other people, so it's like, okay, I'll just canonically, I lost this character in his army, like they fell in battle, but now I recruited these other people. Huh?
More blood for the blood god.
Yeah, but like it's interesting because it's like a reason to try out new party members, and I will say that I did notice by doing that a lot, and I confirmed this by reading a little bit online, which is never wrong, so definitely confirmed that a lot of these lesser warlords they cannot get to the levels of some of the ones that the developers want to be like your mains. So like some of them, like just no matter what you do, will never be as strong as like the ones that they intend to be the ones you're using.
That makes sense.
And what I read online, based on like the story, and I know the story is based in like somewhat some semblance of history. I'm sure obviously like just inspired by or whatever. But like, yeah, there are generals that they're just like, yeah, this guy would never be. He's not the hero of the story, and he's like a low general, and they didn't want the player to be able to like go against canon that far. Yeah,
you bring up a good point, Joe. It's nuts that it's not just like, here's 150, I don't know, I'm making it up, but like here's 150 people that you can have join your party, but they're all just kind of the same warrior class with the same stats. It's like, no, they actually did take the time to like give them all individual like intelligence stats, strength stats, defense stats, so that you could make a use case for like, oh, here's the optimal party, but then like, if you don't recruit this guy or you don't encounter this guy or you don't want to use this kind of thing, you can also go this way. Like we were talking about how the strength of Final Fantasy is that you can make a team of 4, but of any kind of different classes. And here you can have like any, like, I couldn't even imagine. I don't know the names of my characters because I wasn't really looking at it that hard, but like I can't imagine that the 3 of us were running the same team, like that's
right.
that's how many characters you run into, and you have to pick like who's going to be your is it tactician, is it general, like there's one you have to pick to, I forget
tactician.
what they called it. Yeah, so you have to pick one to be your tactician, and you could just like assign that to your strongest, thinking that that's the way to go, but really it's like the one with the
highest intelligence.
Yes, the highest intelligence, to be able to, because there's a weird thing about the magic system, which again is just the tactics, but there are tactics points, so instead of MP, TP, but then there's also a MTP for your max tactical points as like a party, and so you have to put the best, like, you have to put the strongest person in that position to be the tactician to max out the MTPs. This way everybody can use their TP. It's a little less complicated than I'm making things sound, and I just want to say that about this game overall, is that when we talk about it for an episode and we just talk about the systems and the kind of the unique things this game is doing, it might sound like this is a game that completely reinvents RPGs, but we are just highlighting the stuff that like stands out. The more you play this game, the more you just go in the overworld and have the random encounter experience and go to the shops, the more you start to realize like this game is as complicated as you want to make it sound. Like you can, to Sean's point earlier, just use all-out attack and get by and not really have to think too much about strategy or tactics.
Outside of bosses, at least.
Outside of bosses, sure,
Yeah.
sure. But you could also just grind to hell, right? Like you could just level up enough that the bosses aren't that big of a problem.
That's what it sounds like you did.
No. I followed a guide actually very carefully because I got my ass handed to me by those same bosses and was like, I think I need to find out how to play this game. So there was a great, there was many actually on Game FAQs, many guides. I followed the one that's always highest rated, and using that guide, like, I gotta tell you, it's weird how many times this game can surprise you and then go back to basics like right after that, like there's like, oh wow, that wasn't expecting that. Like you recruit so many people just by talking to them or defeating them in battle, and then all of a sudden you got to make sure you have a horse for this one guy, otherwise you can't recruit him. And it's like, whoa, that's like almost like a side quest / story element / missable character thing.
Is that all the steed does? I never bought
yes
one.
Yeah, yes, that is. And it's just funny that like you have those moments. So this game to me kind of kept me on my toes, but also managed to bore me a little bit in the moment to moment.
Because like what you were just describing before, and what led me to believe that you sort of played this via grinding, was like, oh yeah, you just go and you fight a bunch of bandits, and then you go home, and then you sleep, and you come back, and you fight a bunch of bandits, and it's like, that's kind of what it feels like. And there's really no appreciable difference in how a battle plays out, aside from it being harder, between a boss and the random battle enemies. It's even like it could be just as tedious, because these random battles can have 5 forces at once, and the more story bosses can have 5 like armies at once, and you're kind of doing the same thing. And you really have to love the battle system in this game to love this game, I think.
Yeah, because I think that it has its pluses. Like I do actually really, I don't think there was ever a boss battle that I didn't have fun with. I enjoyed the boss battles because, it's never gets like super complicated strategy, but because of the way that I don't know, just because of like something about it is like a little different than another JRPG. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that I don't know exactly what it is. But I guess it's just that I felt a lot more like inclined to, like Mike was saying earlier, to like target the strong forces, lower to equalize things enough where then I could go all out. And I guess you don't have to play it that way, but because I'm playing that way, it does make it feel different. And I was enjoying kind of coming up with that strategy. The problem is all the other battles that aren't boss battles where you don't have to do that. Yes, it gives you that quality of life command of all out where you can just kind of watch them go at it and watch your army take them out. But even that takes kind of long. Like, not anywhere near as long as doing a whole battle, but like you get into a lot of random encounters in this game. So like for that to be happening over and over again, just for you to watch numbers go down, that part does get tedious.
I guess one other thing that I think adds to the flavor of the game and might just be satisfying for a certain kind of player is, unlike a lot of JRPGs, there's a lot of transparency of information, like where you see each health bar. It's almost like just a fighting game in some ways, like where each enemy has its health bar, and if you're doing all out, you see it tick down, or if you're doing the more tactical mode, you're still seeing that visible, okay, I'm actually doing damage, whereas in a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Warrior, yada yada, you're just seeing your attacks are hitting. You don't know how close to death your enemy is. I think that can add some satisfaction to it.
It's funny that when you do finally stop doing the all-out battles and have to do these quote-unquote boss battles or just like more personalized fighting approaches, and then you get into the tactics of things, there was that moment where like, a lot of RPGs are like, this is the heal spell, this is the fire spell, right? Like, and it's called fire or it's called cure, and you're like, yeah, I know exactly what that does because I played other RPGs and I'm going to use it now. This game doesn't have that at all going for it, and required me to constantly keep checking back with the guide to be like, okay, and this spell does what again? Like, they're just, I'm sure that they actually do translate well. It's just that because
it's all
using
in Chinese.
Yeah, it's all Chinese.
Right.
And not Chinese typeface, of course. It's in English.
Yeah,
but
it's like phonetic.
Yeah, phonetically, it just becomes challenging to remember that no matter how many times, because they aren't like labeled or anything.
My rule of thumb was that if I select it and then I can target an enemy, that means big damage time. And if I couldn't do that, then like, this is just like a buff or something.
Yeah, it's
later
funny
on.
because
I was going to say later on, you get other things that you can do to the enemies other than deal damage, like lower their stats. And such.
I never got that far.
Yeah.
and I did like start to, by sight only, like recognize certain spells that I used more often, or tactics that I used more often, where it was like, there was one that increases your resistance or your defense, and there was another one that heals you, obviously, like that one I used a lot. So like I started to recognize it by sight, but if you asked me what they were right now, I couldn't tell you. But like, give me the exact list in the exact order I was looking at them on, I can point out which one's which.
That's a testament to how often you use them, which is great.
Right.
Is there another time period or, that you would like to see the destiny of an emperor treatment done to, where you're playing as historical figures in a very gamified setting.
The American Revolution.
I had a feeling.
Well, only because I'm playing Assassin's Creed 3 right now. The whole time I'm playing it, I'm like, wow, there's nothing is ever set here, ever. That's why I'm like, wow, this is so interesting how battles worked. I'm sure that this game wouldn't really give me the quite the history of like how muskets work and everything, but that
I
kind
think
of thing
it would be
is
funny
interesting.
to make the JRPG version of the American Revolution, like going around as George Washington.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah,
but
let's do it.
The British would attack the way that you do in Destiny of an Emperor, where you have like X amount of troops as your HP, and you deal a lot of damage all at once, and you got to whittle that down. But then the Americans would have some kind of guerrilla warfare mechanics built into theirs, where they can just kind of spread out and not have to do the traditional war games. And I think that would be a noteworthy thing to make that stand out from Destiny of an Emperor. I like the question, Sean. I kind of feel like just in general, so many RPGs are either fantasy or sci-fi that like I'm just down for like not even just Destiny of an Emperor, but like I'm just down for more historical RPGs as a thing. Like forget about this system being forced onto it. Just like let's get our World War II RPGs with decision making trees so that we can alter the course of history. Let's get that.
If I may make a recommendation, and I may have mentioned this in a previous episode, but Expeditions Rome is a game that like it starts out unlike this, which is you are the historical figure in question, and while it is not accurate, it's still doing its best to cover the broad strokes of what's going on. That game starts out with Caesar dying as like a young dude, and now you are in like his position, and you can sort of choose to do things that he may have done or go a different way. It's very much what you kind of described. So I would look that up. It's a lot of fun. It's a turn-based RPG, but like tactical.
I like it.
I'm going to mention some other things that I noticed about this game that don't quite fit under any kind of category, but if you guys want to react to them or bring up things of your own as I mention this, I feel like this is that section now for just like cool little quirks in the game. One that I really liked is that, so obviously you can only have a team of 5 at any given point, but you have to kind of like, you can put them in the reserves or whatever so that you can call them back later, and you could also have the ability to fire people, like basically just let them go. And if you let them go, you can then find them in random battles again and have to fight them because now they're not part of your army. And I don't know, that's something that I didn't think would be possible in a game like this. Like it's like releasing your Pokemon and having the ability to like run into them in the wild again.
Yeah. With like the nickname you gave them and everything still in the wild.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I like
What's
that.
What's a warlord to do other than warlord?
Right. But that kind of brings up another thing that we didn't really mention is that some of these random encounters you come across in the world are these other characters, whether they're bosses that you'll fight later, bosses that you've already fought, like they are roaming the world, quote unquote. And depending on their status in the story, usually if you beat them, you can request that they convert and like join you, and sometimes they'll do it for money, sometimes they'll just do it like because you defeated them, and other times they'll refuse. But like that is a way that you could pick up new companions or new party members, and also now their armies won't be roaming around, and that'll kind of lessen the amount of random encounters in that area. So like there's a lot going on in this game that we have not seen in other games that I also did not think was possible back in 1990.
And then in a lot of RPGs when you start, you have to buy all your equipment in the first town with like some gold that either the king gets you or you find in a chest or you just start with. In this game, you have equipment on you at the start of the game, but
oh god,
it's unequipped. Why do I have to equip the equipment that's already on my persons?
That was weird, because I remember in the first battle that I got into, I was just exploring the menus and went into items like, oh, I wonder if I start with any items, and I'm like, oh, cool, a flail. Maybe I can just throw this at them. Like, is this a throw game? And I selected, and it's like, yeah, you can't use that right now. And then was just like, well, this game is really, like, I'm very weak. And then later realized that I could equip them. So that I don't know what that decision was.
The long play for this game is at 11 hours, which it feels long. I'm sure it's even way longer than that if you don't know exactly what you're doing. I'm sure this could be the kind of game that you could sink as high as like maybe 40 hours into. Like, there are a lot of different chapters and different like twists and turns in the story, and just the world map is very large. The game has a lot of depth to its story and the kind of character relationships. But in any kind of game that's that long, eventually the numbers that you saw in the beginning of the game become like trivial. And so in the Let's Play at the end of it, you start with like 100 HP as your like troops. Mm-hmm. This person has 26,719, 22,500. It's like, what do those numbers mean at this point? Like, everybody's numbers just get really big. All their stats get really big. The food is at 6,955,000. It's like, what is going on? But you got to appreciate that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I definitely felt the like power creep. I guess even in it's sort of the first quarter of the game, which is I definitely didn't get anywhere further than that if I even got that far. But like every time I would kind of come up to like, okay, I'm in like a new section. There's a new boss here or something. I would be getting my ass kicked. Like, and then I would grind a little bit. I would get some new equipment and everything, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm doing really good now. And then 20 minutes later, I'm getting my ass kicked again. Got to grind a little more, so like you more so than usual. I was very aware of like the scaling happening, like and feeling myself scale to try and match the enemies. Like, it just not in a bad or a good way. Just like really noticeable for some reason this time.
And I think this is mostly historically accurate, because I think like the whole like romancing of the Three Kingdoms situation was just three guys in a bar fight, and then it turned into actual billions of people fighting at the end of it.
That's right. Yeah, that's what happened. It started out with it was like 200 people, and then by the end, it was the entire population of the world.
Several times the population of the world, I think.
Yeah, at the time.
And this is an early example in the game, but just to show you that the game isn't just find the next fort, fight all of the major characters there, and now convert the fort to part of your kingdom, to prove that there's actually some kind of questing going on. Very early on in the game, you kind of hit like a, well, what do I do now moment? And that certainly happened to me. That's what made me pull up this guide. And there's a character, Zhao Dong, that you have to recruit by running into him in random battle. And he's kind of like, it's actually like a coin toss thing. The game decides on probability of like, he isn't necessarily loyal to his warlord, so he might offer to join your party, or he might run off and then you have to go find him again in a random encounter. But if you do successfully recruit him, you can go into this cave where there is, like the rival bandits are, and if he's in your party, they'll let you cross the water, which you obviously can't do with any kind of item or anything otherwise, but he needs to be in your party as well. And so that becomes like an interesting mechanic of this game too, where sometimes you need the right person in your party to move the story along, but you just have to know to have that person in your party. Like, oh yeah,
so there's no other way around it.
I don't know if that's true or not. I think that this might have been like a backdoor thing. I can't confirm or deny that, because that's just, I got stuck here and that's what I did instead. Joe, I don't know if you did something different.
No, I did. I think I just it happened to work out for me, so I didn't even realize that would be like something you get stuck on.
Right. Yeah. So all that to say, like, that's something that does happen in this game where you need, time and time again, you need, like, the right kind of item or the right person in your party. Even, like, who is in charge of your party changes pretty early in the game with, is it Liu Bei? He leaves?
He like, leaves to take over because he is promised, like, to be the heir.
At the end of the first chapter.
Yeah.
So that's pretty big, right? Like, the guy who you probably were, like, role-playing as like, yeah, that's me, and everybody else is just joining my party. It's like, well, now I've left the party.
Yeah, but then he gives you he gives, like, all his equipment to, like, the guy that you recruit immediately at that moment. So it's kind of like he just is replaced.
Isn't that like
a
his son?
Was it? I don't remember.
I don't know. I don't know either because I can't track. Yeah, exactly. I can't track these names, and it's totally our fault. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I didn't know who anybody was because I just don't know anything about this story. I'm just
well, and that's what it does feel like. Even with what you're mentioning about, like, needing to have this person in your party to progress and things like that, it feels like maybe the game can be a little bit accused of requiring you to sort of know the story already. I mean, like, some of the stuff, it's like, maybe if I'm very familiar with the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I'd be like, well, at this point, I'm supposed to have this person because I know that. But, like, I don't know. I guess it depends on, and maybe I haven't combed the game thoroughly enough for, like, I'm sure there's enough hints from the NPCs and stuff, like, in another JRPG.
That's entirely possible, because this is a game that does give hints, but what you were describing then, obviously I have not played the game as much as you guys have, but when you were describing that situation of, like, oh, you can go into the bandit camp and you get free passage across this thing, like, that's really cool if that's, like, one way to do it.
Right.
But if that's the only way to do it, then that is some, that's some Castlevania 2 stuff, and I'm not really a big fan of really obscure ways to lock progression. I am a fan of really obscure ways to sidestep things you might think are necessary, like sort of like an immersive sim sort of thing, or like a CRPG. But no, that my opinion flipped on its head there.
I think that can happen in some regards where, like, the battles might be tougher if you didn't take on some of these guys beforehand, like who is, like, at the end of the chapter and stuff. I don't want to say that with 100% certainty, but I do recall seeing that in my guide of, like, if you fought so-and-so earlier, they won't be at this battle. And I thought that was kind of cool, too.
Yeah.
Like, it's keeping track of a lot of moving parts. And we're just one more thing to keep track of. There is a sequel to this game. But it did not come out on the NES. Kind of crazy that this one did, right? Like, this feels like the kind of, like, RPGs didn't sell well back then. I mean, and this is very Japanese or Chinese.
I'll be honest, this feels like such a game, like a type of game that we have not played. And because of it, this week we've also been playing one of our Bites games, and I kept thinking this was the Bites game because I was like, yeah, this didn't come out in the US because, like, US audiences don't play this kind of game, and I'm like, no, this isn't the Bites game. This is the regular game for the regular podcast. So yeah, it's funny because it is a very unique experience compared to really anything we've played. Obviously, closer to some things like Dragon Warrior and stuff, but it definitely has its own unique charm.
And the just to close it up, the other one on the Famicom that we may explore in a Nostalgia Bites episode for our Patreon members, that removed the food management system, so there's no, like, rice to collect or anything. It kind of made the open world thing, like, a little more linear, so it's not, like, on rails necessarily, but there's less branching paths and, like, go anywhere you want kind of thing, and more like take down this, then do that. But it's not all, like, removing features. There was also the introduction of formation tactics in addition to the magic system that we had in this one. Now it's like, put your characters in a specific order for specific stat bonuses or special effects during battle. So I like that because that kind of plays into, again, another thing that you would see in the Koei games of, like, what kind of units you want to place near each other and everything. Like having that in an RPG sounds cool and reminds me a little bit like what you would see on the Super Nintendo, not necessarily the Famicom.
And then when you say formation, though, I mean, this is still like a regular like party like you would see on the screen. And you're there. It's not like it's become like a tactical RPG.
Yeah. Still
okay.
Just just the order that you want them to be.
Doesn't formation affect something in this game?
The formation in this game affects like who takes more damage.
Yes.
So theoretically, you would think that you want to put your strongest, like the ones with the most soldiers, up front, but actually because of the way that the power of 10 rule works, you want to put those guys in the back of the party so that they're always dealing.
Do that. I always put my
nuts,
strongest
but it's
in the
true.
front. But, so yeah, so wait, why put them in the back?
Because then they're not getting hurt as much and they're still dealing their max output of damage.
I see, yeah. But
it seems kind of broken.
Because I also was worrying more about like anyone dying, because another thing to think about is like if you have 5 party members, they're all kind of, I mean, granted, they're not splitting the damage equally because more damage is going to the people in the front than in the back, but like they are splitting the damage. Once you have 3 people left, now all that damage is being split among 3 people. Once you have 2 people left, so it's like when the fewer people you have left, the more that those people are taking damage. Sounds really obvious now when I say that out loud, and of course that's obviously the case in any other RPG ever with a party, but like it's so much more visible this time because like of the all-out feature where you just like see it like, wow, everyone's health's going down slowly. One person dies, oh, it's going down fast. 2 people die, it's like, oh my god, my health is plummeting. You know, it's like it's just so much more top of mind.
There's a lot of positive feedback loops.
Yeah. So that's why I was always trying to keep strongest on top. So it's like he can take a bunch of hits, whereas the weaker can't. But like I'm trying to keep it spread out, like keep everybody alive, you know.
And apparently, Destiny of an Emperor is very well regarded in its fan community to the point where they have their own modding tool, Destiny of an Editor, where you can change the stats of any of these characters, change the names of the characters, the maps, the encounters, the graphics. Apparently, there is an annual like award for the best new Destiny of an Emperor hack. So there's certainly a community here, just like there is for Tecmo Bowl.
Do you think there's a George Washington one?
Right? Where's the American Revolution one? I'm sure that they're also they're changing like the setting in a lot of these too. If they're able to change the maps. So maybe it already exists, Joe. Check out the Destiny of an Editor.
Oh, that's a look.
And we will look into whether Destiny of an Emperor will be the next game on the Essential Games list. Right now, Destiny of an Emperor is giving me more of like, cult status than it is essential status. I think this game is like really under the radar. I had never heard of it. It totally made me like I wasn't playing it early enough, and I was like, shit, I gotta find some time for this. Like this is a different kind of game than I thought I was gonna be playing. And over the course of like the 2 weeks that I was playing it, it was something that I both respected but wanted a lot more out of it than what it gave me. I think what we have here is kind of what I was getting at in the body of the episode, where you can make this game sound like it's like a massive open world, 3 kingdoms, unbelievable, 150 recruitable characters, and you can do this and you can do that, and you won't believe what happens in chapter 4. And it's like you kind of do want it to be that game, but ultimately it is just a little too repetitive. It almost reminds me of like Dragon Warrior, where it's like, it's a totally competent NES RPG, beloved by many, but in today's time, it's a little too, not stale, but it's just, it overstays its welcome. There was a point in this game early on where I was like, oh, I can't wait to like see how this ends. And then there was a point where like, I think I'm ready to end it. And to me, that's not a good sign of an essential game, even though it laid down so many cool features for an RPG that just got me thinking differently about like what RPGs can be doing. Like I've never seen this with the HP system being also the number of troops you have. Like it's more than just flavor text. It actually changes how you do damage. Like that's awesome, but it's not awesome enough to to just put it on the essential games list for reasons like that. So for me, it's a no. What about you, Joe?
I love a lot of what this game is doing. I really love the recruiting warlords as you go and sort of building your party, like actually building your party. You're not just picking up, 6 out of 9 possible party members. Like, you're really building like pretty unique party, and you're changing the way that the overworld sort of works with random encounters. And the battle system is pretty fun too. I appreciate the all-out feature kind of speeding things up. I mean, if that wasn't in it, this game would be 200 hours long. But yeah, I think that like I started with sort of echoing you, Mike. I started with this like high level of excitement and interest, and like a little bit of like tediousness or like frustration to like the tediousness, and that kind of bar graph reversed slowly as I went. And I do think that like I really, really enjoyed the combat and the boss battles of this game, but I didn't enjoy them as much as I was bored from the rest of, like, from the random encounters as time went on. Now, I didn't get, super far in this game either, and I have watched some footage, and it does seem like really late in the game, the battles start to get like more strategic, or like less than just who is stronger, in the sense where now like the enemies are using more tactics, they're healing, they're using defensive things. They're trying to use things to stop you from attacking. And on one hand, I could see that making it even more tedious, but on the other hand, I wish I kind of had gotten to a point where I felt that, or it didn't take so long to get there, so I can at least feel like there's a little more strategizing once things started to get stale. But I suspect that would get stale eventually too. So I don't know. I think this is absolute play it for any like JRPG fan, but I can't put this on the essential game list for me.
Sean.
Yeah. So this may sound a little off topic, but like I'd say the last few years
the American
of this
Revolution.
The last few years of this podcast, behind the scenes, and maybe I've alluded to it in prior episodes, have kind of been me falling out of love with the JRPG, and that shouldn't really, like, no game should bear the brunt of that change in taste and opinion. But already, Destiny of an Emperor, just because it's leaning so much into that classic style, it kind of got off on the wrong foot for me. However, I can appreciate all those things that you guys pointed out as new and unique and something we haven't seen before, and I do appreciate that. And it allowed me to to put a little bit more time into it than I really originally wanted to, because that did pique my interest. However, it still is at its core a very basic JRPG where you have to open up the menu to interact with anything, and that just really grinds my gears in a way that I forgot about since Dragon Warrior. So the points get taken off for that too. But yeah, I like a lot of the ideas, and a lot of the things on paper are really cool. I didn't have too much fun with this game. So yeah, it's not essential for me.
Sean, I like what you brought up about the menuing, because there is something about like breaking immersion, and nothing does that more than when you walk over a treasure chest instead of like face it.
It's just painted on the floor.
Right, and you have to like stand over it and then go into the menu and press the check button to check what's inside of it. And it's like, why couldn't it just be, I'm facing this, I'm going to press A, and it's going to tell me what I checked? Like, I understand we're not there yet, but I hate when we're not there yet in these older games. Are we there yet?